There is a silence deeper than absence, more precise than solitude, the silence that descends when one finally stops pretending. It comes not with answers, but with the collapse of questions. It does not promise light, it strips away the need for it. Beneath the noise of desire and distraction, beneath the theatrical performance of hope and ambition, there is the nakedness of being, and in that bareness, something more real than joy, the truth of suffering. To be alive is to thirst for what cannot quench, to reach for forms that dissolve in the grasp. We are born into longing, not for what we need, but for what we imagine we lack. The will, blind and relentless, drives the heart like a beast circling the walls of a collapsing temple. And still, we name this hunger purpose, this madness progress. What strange creatures we are, building empires from sand while pretending not to notice the tide. Childhood is no refuge, only the earliest taste of confusion. The world teaches cruelty, not with whips, but with smiles. It promises permanence through the body, meaning through achievement, salvation through love. But the body decays, achievement turns hollow, and love, when not poisoned by expectation, is gutted by loss. The tragedy is not that we suffer, but that we are surprised by it as if suffering were the intruder and not the architect of consciousness. Modernity, that glittering illusion, offers relief without liberation. It gives us endless choice, but not meaning. It surrounds us with comfort and yet deepens the void. We stare into glowing screens, not to learn, but to forget that we are alone. Algorithms simulate intimacy, commerce mimics connection, and the gods we once trembled before have been replaced by therapists and influencers, each promising escape without confrontation. But no algorithm can decode the soul, and no pill can silence the scream beneath stillness. What is this emptiness, then, that so many fear? It is not failure, it is not brokenness, it is the peeling away of everything false. When the dream ends and the lights go out, what remains is not despair, but the awareness that you have always been more than the roles you performed. You are not the resume, not the family name, not even the story you told yourself in moments of quiet desperation. You are the witness of all these, and the witness suffers because it sees clearly. To suffer is not a curse, it is the unavoidable side effect of knowing. The animals flee from pain instinctively. Only man is cursed with memory, with the capacity to reflect on loss long after the wound has healed. And yet in this reflection is the birth of depth. A tree that does not feel winter cannot truly know spring, but we, who live mostly in the autumn of our illusions, must learn to find beauty in the falling leaves, not in the promise of rebirth. The will to live is not the same as the will to truth. One seeks distraction, the other demands dissolution. To follow truth is to dissolve all illusions of permanence, of identity, of justice. It is to see the world not as it should be, but as it is indifferent, fleeting, painfully beautiful in its futility. And in that vision, one does not grow stronger, one becomes hollow enough to hold silence. Love, that exalted fiction, is not salvation. It is projection, the temporary fusion of two solitudes that cannot bear themselves. We do not fall in love with the other. We fall in love with the way they mirror our illusions. And when the mirror cracks, we blame them for showing us what we are. True love, if it exists at all, is the quiet mourning of this lie, the companionship of two beings who have surrendered the need to be completed. The self is a performance. There is no core, no essence, no final revelation where you discover who you really are. The more deeply you look, the more you find shifting masks, inherited voices, the echo of ancestral fears. To know oneself is not to affirm, it is to dismantle. And what remains after dismantling is not a better self, but the end of self as a need. Loneliness is not the absence of others, it is the presence of your own awareness, unmasked. Most cannot bear it. They seek company not out of love, but out of terror. They mistake distraction for connection, and when the party ends, they are more alone than before. But there is a loneliness that is holy, the kind that comes when you stop reaching and begin to see. This loneliness is not a wound, but a window. History is a gallery of failed redemptions. Every ideology begins with the promise of salvation and ends with the corpse of truth beneath the flag. Religion offers heaven, Politics offers justice. Capitalism offers freedom, all disguises for the same seduction, the idea that suffering can be overcome. But suffering is not the problem. The desire to eliminate its island, pain refines. It scours the illusions like wind across a desert. What remains, if anything, is not joy but clarity. A life stripped of illusion is not easier. It is simply more real. And in that reality, there is a kind of peace that does not smile. The peace of one who no longer struggles against what island. You do not need to become anything. Becoming is the disease. The child wants to be an adult. The adult wants to be successful. The successful long for simplicity, always the chase, never the stillness. But what if you were to stop? Not because you gave up, but because you saw through the game. The stillness that follows is not resignation, it is release. Let the world call it nihilism. Let them say you are cold, detached, bitter. But what they do not see is that in letting go, you do not fall, you float. You are no longer bound by the weight of should, of must, of someday. You are not free because you got what you wanted. You are free because you saw that wanting is the cage. In silence, the soul is revealed not as something grand, but as something empty. And yet that emptiness is not lack. It is the space where illusion once lived. Most spend their lives decorating that illusion. They call it success, happiness, legacy. But you, if you are listening, you are not most. You have seen through the curtain, and what you find behind it is not meaning, but the end of the need for it. To feel empty is not to be broken. It is to stand on the edge of the world and see that it does not care and to be at peace with that. The stars do not shine for you. The earth does not hold you dear. And yet, here you are, not as a mistake, not as a triumph, but as a flicker of awareness in a sea of forgetting. This, perhaps, is the strange grace of suffering, that in our most silent despair, we come closest to truth. Not the truth of philosophy or belief, but the naked, indifferent truth of being itself. And in that truth, the soul does not sing, it ceases to scream. Let it be. Let the void remain unfilled. Let the ache remain unsoothed. In that ache, you are most real. And though there is no triumph, no redemption, no great revelation, there is peace. The peace of no longer needing more. When life feels empty, it is not the end. It is the beginning of seeing without wanting. The deeper one sinks into the fabric of existence. The more clearly the pattern of pain reveals itself, not as anomaly, but as essence. Pleasure flickers, momentary and deceptive, while suffering persists like a shadow with no source. We cling to moments of happiness as though they were lifelines. But they are only echoes, brief intermissions in the ongoing play of disappointment. Joy is not a gift. It is a trap laid by the will to keep us circling. What we call fulfillment is but a lull in the endless gnawing hunger for more. There is no true satisfaction, only the brief silencing of craving. Even in love, even in art, even in the rare stillness of beauty, the will lurks, ever famished. It pushes through us like wind through dead branches, animating but never nourishing. We are vessels of yearning, and the world responds not with balm but with mirrors. Every desire fulfilled only reveals another layer of wanting beneath it, like peeling skin from a wound that never heals. We are not progressing, we are looping in deeper circles of the same thirst. The illusions we call progress are but polished chains. Technology, comfort, and spectacle do not liberate, they obscure. They sedate the anguish with distractions too bright to examine. But beneath the sheen of convenience lies the same abyss, the solitude of a self that cannot escape itself. We pretend that our achievements elevate us, but the skyscraper is built on the same bones as the hut. Time, death, fear. Nothing is cured by innovation. The sickness is ontological, not circumstantial. And so we turn inward, not as explorers, but as fugitives. Meditation, therapy, ritual all become means to domesticate despair. We do not seek truth in these practices. We seek anesthesia. But truth cannot be digested through soft rituals. It arrives like a blade, cold and sudden. It does not ask to be welcomed. It cuts through comfort to reveal what was always beneath: the futility of the chase, the absurdity of self-construction, the relentless demand of existence without inherent meaning. Yet there is a freedom in this collapse. When all narratives fail, when the world no longer offers consolations, what remains is not despair, but a silence so vast it cannot be named. In this silence, one no longer needs to perform. The masks fall not with ceremony, but with exhaustion, and what stands in their absence is not a truer self, but the absence of the need for one. To cease becoming is not to die, it is to finally begin seeing. Suffering, long resisted, becomes a strange companion, not because it changes, but because we do. We cease to struggle against it, not from defeat, but from wisdom. We see that to live is to be pierced, not once, but continuously. And to accept this is not to wallow, but to awaken. There is a terrible clarity in suffering that purifies all false hopes. It does not enlighten, it erases. Detachment is not a stance. It is a natural consequence of seeing clearly. When the spectacle no longer dazzles, when the performance no longer seduces, the soul draws back not in bitterness, but in stillness. It no longer reaches, it no longer resists. It simply remains, like ash after fire no longer burning, but still warm with memory. This is not numbness, it is depth without noise. And what of love, when seen without illusion? It becomes less a salvation, more a quiet holding of sorrow together. Two beings, each aware of their incompleteness, no longer seeking completion in the other. A communion of brokenness, not a fusion of wholeness. In this, there is tenderness, but no rescue. Love does not heal, it reveals what cannot be healed. And yet, in that revelation, something tender survives. The world continues. The sun rises without purpose. The seasons turn without witness. Humanity dances to rhythms it does not understand, convinced that meaning lies just beyond the next threshold. But for the one who has stopped, who has stepped outside the circle, the dance becomes visible in its tragic repetition. They do not mock it, nor do they envy it. They simply observe, and in that observation they are free. This is not the freedom of will, but the freedom from it. A release from striving, from constructing, from defending the illusion of importance. One does not become passive, one becomes present, without agenda, without needing to matter. The wind moves, the breath enters and exits. The eyes see without naming. There is no narrative here, only being, raw and undescribed. Let the world have its triumphs. Let the noise continue without your participation. You have seen what lies beneath the applause. You have tasted the emptiness wrapped in gold. Now, let silence have you. Let the void remain unfilled, not because you cannot fill it, but because it no longer demands to be filled. This is the end of seeking, not the end of life, but the end of illusion. And in this end, there is a soft, uncelebrated peace, the peace of one who no longer fights the truth. The years pass like ghosts through a corridor unseen, but always present. The body, once animated by promise, becomes a husk of memory. Time does not wound, it strips. It takes without warning, without ceremony, without apology. And still, we mark our days with hope, as if the calendar were a ladder leading somewhere other than the grave. But all it leads to is thinning breath, brittle joints, and the dawning recognition that nothing we build can follow us into the silence. Fame, wealth, even legacy, these are shadows cast by the ego upon a wall that soon collapses. We chase recognition not because it sustains us, but because we fear vanishing. The terror is not of death, but of being forgotten. Yet even the greatest names become dust in the throat of time. The monuments crumble, the books fade, the voices recorded are erased by newer noise. And the self we tried so desperately to preserve was never more than a flicker of will now extinguished, now irrelevant. There is no victory over time, only the brief illusion of delay. The young mistake motion for direction, energy for destiny. They believe they are climbing, but the mountain they scale is made of sand. Eventually, they look down and see not altitude, but erosion. What they have lost is not potential, but the ability to keep lying to themselves. And it is then and only then that the real life begins. Not the life of ambition, but of awareness. Most will never reach this. They will die clinging to the scaffolding of persona, still waiting for the moment when life finally delivers. But life is not a courier of joy. It does not owe us resolution. It does not offer justice. It is a field of indifferent forces, blind and ceaseless. To walk through it with eyes open is to endure a kind of quiet violence, not of pain, but of truth. And truth does not uplift, it levels. To awaken is not to find meaning, but to lose the need for it. Meaning is a construct, a scaffold erected to keep the void at bay. We assign significance to events, to people, to suffering, not because it is there, but because without it, the silence would be unbearable. But once you have heard that silence and survived it, you no longer beg for meaning. You wear the emptiness like a cloak, heavy but real. And in that weight, there is gravity. Not the gravity of planets or physics, but the gravity of presence, the pull toward what island. You no longer spin in fantasy. You no longer drift in dreams. You are grounded, not by joy, but by lucidity. The eyes no longer search, they witness. And in the gaze of such witnessing, even pain becomes sacred, not because it is good, but because it is true. Suffering, once resisted, becomes the lens through which all else is seen. It clarifies the false from the real. It burns away the sentimental. It leaves only what cannot be denied, that to be is to hurt, and to know is to carry that hurt without demand for explanation. There is no noble cause, no ultimate reward. There is only the sacredness of enduring without illusion. Detachment is not disinterest. It is not coldness. It is a deeper form of love, the kind that no longer clutches, no longer claims, no longer consumes. It is the love of the sky for the sea, distant, yet reflecting its every tremor. One does not cease to care, one ceases to need. And in that shift, what once was desperation becomes serenity. The world will continue spinning its stories. The lovers will make promises they cannot keep. The leaders will speak of futures that never arrive. The children will dream of greatness, and all of it will pass, again and again, as it always has. The tragedy is not in the repetition. The tragedy is in believing it should be otherwise. Let the illusion fade. Let the idols fall. Let the will rest, even for a moment. You are not here to triumph. You are here to see, not to fix, only to witness. And in that witnessing, there is a beauty that cannot be named. Not a beauty of form or function, but of pure existence. A flower blooming in a graveyard. A breath taken without hope. A stillness that does not need to be understood. This is the truth. You will lose everything. Your health, your dreams, your name, your body, your loves, all will dissolve. But in that dissolution, you may find something strange. The absence of fear. When there is nothing left to hold, the hands grow quiet. When there is nothing left to seek, the eyes finally see. And what they see is not salvation, but the world as it is. Fleeting, wounded, magnificent in its indifference. Let that be enough. Let the world be what it island. Let yourself be what you are, without disguise, without defense. In this, there is no climax. There is no awakening. There is only surrender. And in that surrender, there is peace. Not the peace of fulfillment, but the peace of no longer needing to be fulfilled. It is here, in the dusk of desire, that the soul ceases its tremble. It does not rejoice. It does not weep. It simply rests, like a candle that burns not for light, but because it must. There is a particular kind of silence that follows despair, not the loud grief of breaking, but the hollow quiet of having nothing left to expect. When all the scaffolding has fallen, when every ambition has turned to ash, and even love has grown mute with distance, what remains is not emptiness, but exposure. The soul, stripped bare of ornaments, does not shine, it does not rise, it remains still, aware, and irreversibly altered. And in that awareness, the final illusions begin to dissolve. The belief that life owes us something, peace, purpose, fairness, is the last lie to fall. For most, it persists like a background hum, invisible but persistent, shaping every hope and every disappointment. It is not until one sees the world clearly with no promises, no hidden order, no redemptive arc, that the self, so long entangled in expectation, begins to unwind. This unraveling is not pain, it is the end of resistance. One stops looking for the map and begins to walk, unburdened by destination. Even memory becomes a strange affliction. What once comforted becomes an ache, not for what was, but for what was imagined to be. Nostalgia is a soft deception, painting the past in colors the present never had. We remember not the truth, but the version of ourselves we needed to believe existed. In shedding that self, memory turns from refuge to mirror, and the gaze that falls upon it is no longer searching, but silent. The past does not redeem, it merely confirms that nothing lasts, not joy, not sorrow, not even the stories we told to survive. What is left, then, when there is no story to protect, no future to chase, only the moment? And even that is fragile, dissolving as soon as it is named. Presence becomes less a practice than a surrender. You do not hold the moment. It holds you, briefly, before releasing you into the next breathless instant. Time ceases to be a path and becomes a current. You do not move through it, it moves through you, indifferent, unshaped by your will. And still, the world urges performance. It asks for smiles, for ambition, for answers. It punishes stillness with insignificance, silence with obscurity. But there is no refuge in approval. The applause is always conditional, always fading. Those who once praised you will forget you. Those who loved you will change or vanish. Every connection, no matter how sincere, carries within it the seed of its own ending. To cling is to suffer, to detach is to witness. This witnessing is not passive. It is the most demanding form of presence, to see without interfering, to feel without flinching. You do not escape the world by withdrawing. You enter it more fully by no longer trying to control it. The rain falls, the body aches, the voice of the world hums on without your consent. And you, neither participant nor spectator, simply remain, not because you must, but because you are. There is, in this quiet resignation, a strange kind of dignity. Not the dignity of accomplishment or virtue, but of endurance without illusion. You no longer pretend that the wound will close or that the ache will vanish. You carry it like a stone in the chest, heavy, familiar, oddly intimate. And in time, you stop resenting it. It becomes part of your rhythm, the silent weight that grounds you when all else drifts. Freedom, if it exists, is not in choice. It is in detachment from the illusion that choice defines you. The world offers paths, yes, but all lead to the same end. The roads diverge, but the dust is the same. Whether you build or destroy, whether you rise or fall, whether you are loved or forgotten, the silence at the end does not change. To live freely is not to choose more wisely, but to see that choice itself is a veil. And what of beauty, then? Does it lose its luster when all is stripped bare? No, it becomes sharper, more severe. Beauty ceases to be decoration and becomes a wound, brief, intense, inexplicable. A tree trembling in wind, a face caught in unguarded thought, the way light falls across a ruined wall, these do not inspire hope, they provoke stillness. They remind you that even in futility, form remains. Not to please, but to be. This, perhaps, is the final truth. Nothing is solved, nothing is fixed, and yet it is enough. Not because it satisfies, but because it reveals. You were not meant to understand. You were meant to see, and once seen, there is no need to speak. The soul, weary of striving, closes its eyes not in sleep, but in awakening, not to light, but to the absence of the need for it. You walk not toward meaning, but into the deepening quiet, and in that quiet, you are not alone, you are no one, and in that, utterly free. And now the dusk deepens, not in sky, but in soul. What once reached outward, the hands, the thoughts, the longings, now folds inward, like petals closing around the cold. The need to be heard, to be seen, to be known, fades like a whisper in a storm. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. Even sorrow, once so vivid, becomes still not absent, but complete, like a melody that does not end, but vanishes into silence. And in that vanishing, there is peace, not because all was made right, but because nothing remains to be corrected. The will, that ceaseless engine of becoming, lies quiet. It has exhausted itself against the walls of reality, and its cries have echoed long enough. Where once it demanded, now it watches. Where once it tore through life with its 1,000 appetites, now it observes the passing of all things with the calm of one who knows that there is nothing left to want. This is not enlightenment, it is simply the end of illusion. And in that end, a different kind of clarity descends, not radiant, but grey, soft as ash. The world, too, changes not in fact, but in appearance. It no longer glows with the projections of the self. It becomes simple again, unadorned. The tree is no longer a metaphor. The sky is no longer a sign. They are what they are, mute, impermanent, indifferent. And in their indifference, something sacred is glimpsed, not a god, not a message, but the stark beauty of existence freed from meaning. It does not speak, and therefore it does not lie. What is this final stillness, if not death lived while breathing? The ego loosens its grip not in defeat, but in recognition. It was always a mask, a story told to stave off the terror of not being needed. Now the terror has been faced. Now the story has unraveled. And what stands behind it is not a deeper self, but a silence that asks for nothing, promises nothing, regrets nothing. The others, still caught in the dance, will not understand. They will look upon this stillness as loss, this detachment as sorrow. But they are still chasing fireflies, still begging the night to become day. They will call your silence apathy, your calm despair. Let them. Their voices belong to the dream. You have awoken not into joy, but into awareness. And awareness has no need to explain itself. If love returns, let it be a quiet one, not the blaze of longing, but the warmth of shared solitude. A gaze that does not seek, a presence that does not cling. Let it be the meeting of two silences, each intact, each undemanding. There is no ecstasy left, only tenderness. The tenderness of two beings who no longer ask to be saved, but are content to vanish gently together. The end does not come with trumpets. It does not arrive in climax or revelation. It creeps in like fog, softening the edges of things. One day, the striving stops. One day, the fear loses its teeth. One day, the questions go unanswered, not because they were solved, but because they no longer matter. You look at the sky, and it does not reflect you. It simply exists. And that, at last, is enough. So let the final breath be like the first unchosen, unclaimed. Let it pass through you without resistance. The self that held so tightly has opened. The will that strained towards something has released. Nothing is left but stillness, and in that stillness, no despair. Only the quiet folding of being into non-being. Only the soft erasure of a name that no longer needs to be remembered. The candle does not fight, it's extinguishing. It flickers, it surrenders, it vanishes, and in the darkness that follows, there is no loss. There is only the end of wanting and the strange, beautiful silence that remains.